In 3rd century BCE, the Roman Republic was on the brink. Faced with brutal foes within the Italian peninsula, the Romans needed a better weapon, a shorter, more lethal and faster one than the long, heavy swords their enemies were using. That weapon was the Gladius, pilfered from the Celtiberians of Hispania. The Gladius would remain the backbone of Roman infantry warfare for over 400 years. It was brief, typically 18-24 inches in blade length, double-edged and designed for thrusting rather than slashing. Within close phalanx formation, where maneuverability was minimal, Gladius turned Roman legions flesh grinders. Before the Gladius, Roman soldiers had used the Greek pattern xiphos or other local daggers, but they were too long to use in close-up formation combat. During the Second Punic War, when Roman legions clashed with Hannibal's army, they encountered the Gladius Hispaniensis of Iberian mercenaries who had allied with Carthage. Roman commanders quickly valued its ruthless efficiency. Deadly yet easy to manufacture, light and efficient, it was soon emulated by the Romans and standardized across the Republic's forces. This wasn't the creation of a sword, this was the creation of Rome's warfighting system. As Rome's power grew, so too did the Gladius become a symbol of power and accuracy. The legionnaires were drilled to strike the enemy's midriff, between the ribs or under the shield. Combined with the mythical scutum, shield, and disciplined formation tactics, the Gladius gave Rome its deadly advantage. It was not the length of the blade that proved so formidable, but the discipline that lay behind it. From Cannae to Zama, the Gladius was the steel pulse of the Roman war machine. As the Roman Republic expanded and became the Roman Empire, the Gladius began evolving as well. Between the 2nd century BCE and the 1st century CE, several types of the Gladius were created, each adapting to the needs of Rome's legions and the landscapes they fought on. The most famous among them, the Mainz Gladius, emerged around 20 BCE and featured a broader blade and was slightly longer than its Hispaniensis predecessor. Its solid construction made it fit for stabbing along with slashing, and it made the Roman soldiers more versatile as they fought their way from Germania to Judea. Yet another significant evolution was the Fulham Gladius, a transitional model between the Mainz and the later Pompeii Gladius, which appeared in the area around 50 CE. It possessed an even more parallel-edged blade and sharpened point, applicable to close fighting in densely packed units. It also reflected the growing emphasis on precision and thrusting, especially as Roman warfare evolved to become more complex. Each Gladius iteration was not just a weapon, but a reflection of the era's warfare, the dangers faced, the territories conquered, and the military dictums adhered to by the imperial legions. The Gladius of Pompeii became the most standardized and disseminated form of the sword due to the extensive, logistically supported system of Rome. It was spread from Britain to the Levant throughout the empire and was symbolic of Rome at its peak. Regularized, systematic, and brutally efficient. With siege warfare and urban combat becoming an increasing reality, this short Gladius offered greater control and killing thrusts in the cramped, confined spaces of combat within cities. It was the product of centuries of warfare, tempered steel, honed by generations of conquest. To appreciate the power of the Gladius, however, one must move beyond its blade and into the doctrine that wielded it. The Roman war machine was a conquest machine and a discipline machine, and the Gladius stood at the center of its functionality. Roman training focused on thrusting, the quickest, most deadly motion that could pierce enemy armor and reach the organs, and every legionnaire was drilled relentlessly, not only to thrust with precision, but to fight as part of a living wall of sword and shield. This fusion of tactics and technology created a military juggernaut. The Roman legion used the triplex aces formation, 3 lines of infantry that moved in and out of combat, with the front line delivering quick, ferocious thrusts with the gladius. Combined with the scutum, the rectangular shield, legionaries advanced in order and cohesion. This tactic gave them an advantage over less organized foes who wielded wild slashes and overhead strikes. Roman discipline turned that seemingly small, unassuming sword into the center of a murder factory. The gladius was not merely a weapon, it was a steel-shod catechism. In the heat of battle, a legionnaire would fight shoulder to shoulder, alongside other soldiers, moving forward as a unit. The gladius was ideal for stabbing around or under shields, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy line. Quick thrusts were directed into the belly or groin region, areas poorly protected by armor. In siege warfare, the tight spaces of narrow alleys and close hallways were a breeze to fight in with the compact gladius. It was brutal, effective, and ruthlessly efficient. With each triumph, from Gaul to Egypt, the gladius wrote Rome's history in blood. Although forged for war, the gladius possessed deep cultural and symbolic meaning in Roman society. It was a badge of citizenship and status, carried by Rome's legionaries, which were sometimes drafted from the average men, but eventually became heroes of the front. Veterans would return to their cities with their gladius as a badge of service. Statues and reliefs most often depicted emperors and soldiers with the gladius on their side, not just as a sword, but also as an icon of Roman justice and order. The gladius also became a symbol of imperial authority. Generals carried their gladii in triumphal processions in Rome, along with enemy standards and spoils captured. The sword appeared in temples, in civic art, and even in literature, where it symbolized Rome's divine mandate to rule. In many respects, the gladius symbolized Romanitas, the set of values and identity that defined what it was to be Roman. From Senate chambers to border fortresses, its image emphasized the strength and reach of the empire. Even in gladiatorial arenas, the gladius was the center. Though gladiators used an array of weapons, the majority had some form of the short gladius, meant for flashy combats in the presence of bellowing crowds. The public spectacle was a blunt reminder of Rome's warrior background, whether on a soldier's hand, a statue, or a slave fighting for freedom. The gladius cut through all levels of Roman society. Its heritage was not just written on the ground of conquered lands, but inscribed into the very center of Rome itself. By the 2nd century CE, the Roman military was evolving, and so was its sword. The gladius, which had dominated close infantry combat, began to give ground to a longer sword, the Spatha. Originating with cavalrymen who needed more reach, the Spatha was up to 34 inches and was better suited to the more mobile and mixed nature of Rome's border wars. The shift from gladius to Spatha was not merely a tactical one, but also reflected the evolving nature of the Roman army, from citizen soldiers to professional mercenaries drawn from across the empire. This development was gradual. Legionaries continued to employ the gladius in city and traditional infantry work, but as the empire advanced into more mountainous terrain and faced the Germanic peoples with longer swords and loose formation, the Spatha gained popularity. Its longer reach enabled Roman troops to gain in open combat and horseback attacks. The weapon's design was likely to have been drawn from Germanic and Celtic swords, but now with Roman metalworking, balance, and precision. It was longer, but still a weapon of discipline and control. By the late 3rd century, the Spatha had largely supplanted the Gladius. In most legions, it was suspended on the left hip like the Gladius, but its use signaled a new style of warfare, more mobile, less bound by tight formations. The Roman soldier had evolved, and so had his sword. The Gladius dropped into ceremonial practice and tradition, being supplanted by the Spatha as the tool of Rome's last centuries of conquest and defense. Yet, even when the empire dissolved, the influence of the Gladius continued in every straight-edged sword that followed it. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century CE, its swords did not collapse with it. The Spatha and Gladius did not vanish. They evolved. The Spatha had a direct influence on the early medieval swords of the Franks, the Goths, and later the Carolingians. These longer, straight blades, optimized for slashing and thrusting, formed the foundation of the knightly arming sword of medieval Europe. Rome's emphasis on metalwork and dedication to standardized production provided the blueprint for centuries of European sword making. The heritage was not only technological, but symbolic. During medieval coronation ceremonies, monarchs received swords that imitated Roman patterns, symbols of divine authority and justice. In literature, remnants of the Roman sword occur in epics and chronicles. Emperors and knights drew their legitimacy to govern from Rome. Even in Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, swordsmithing continued to be done in the Roman fashion, blending Eastern and Western motifs into hybrid swords that retained the Spatha's character. The Gladius today is an icon, a marker of Roman precision, power, and discipline. They are displayed in museums as weapons, yet as symbols of a strong civilization. Reenactors, historians, and filmmakers reconstruct them to study Rome's military genius. In marble, metal, or memory, the Roman sword still slices through history, an edge that reordered the world.